when I'm writing music, if your favorite track of all time is not the track you're currently writing on, then you're kind of doing it wrong.
Soundtracks are so important to the overall feel of a video game. They reflect the world of the game and even provide a necessary vibe to your experience. But what does it take to make one? Hi, I'm Ed from Retroware. Today I'm joined by Matt Creamer from Raddland Studios, who recently made the soundtrack for our new game Prison City. Prison City is available now on PC and coming soon to consoles. Matt, please tell the lovely people at home who you are, how long you've been in the industry, and tell us about some of your past works as well.
Hi, Ed. I've been in this industry for about 12 years now. I think I started in 2012 with Retro City Rampage. It was actually the first game I ever worked on. And believe it or not, I was making chiptunes, which are like NES, Nintendo flavored music, just as a hobby for a long time. And I got a little bit of a following on the internet for it. And it was actually on my MySpace page that the developer for Retro City Rampage contacted me and said, we're wondering if you'd like to work on this game, which was like an NES homage to Grand Theft Auto. And I thought it was spam at first, so I didn't respond because I'm like, there's no way anyone, because this was even old for MySpace. I don't even know why I logged in, but I was like, this is going to be a spam email. It's not going to work. But I sent a mail back, and it sort of ballooned into a career in the industry. So it all started from chiptune music. From there, it's moved to absolutely everything. I didn't really realize I wanted to write other types of music until Mass Effect 1 came out. I'm like, that is it for me. Like, I love synth music. I want to make stuff that's not just chiptunes, but like chiptunes and other. And that was right around the time, like right while I was at school, I got the contact to do Retro City Rampage. So
after getting into Retro City Rampage and other games, how did you get involved with Prison City?
If you just write your best music and put it in a game, that won't necessarily lead to more projects. I thought like word of mouth is just going to crush it. And it did for like 8 years. Word of mouth was all I went by, and I would just get emails and start new projects like steadily, like there was no break. And then suddenly around like 2017 or something, there was just like hard stop. There was no more emails in my inbox. And I was like, okay, I have to take more command over promoting myself. So I actually went through this big phase where I was on Twitter, and I would scroll down and look at any project that I thought looked cool, and I would make a big spreadsheet of like what their contact was, what their Twitter was, what their webpage was, and I actually just cold called like dozens and dozens of developers for projects that I thought looked cool. And so Programancer was definitely one. He was working on Simon Quest at the time, and I thought, this looks so darn cool. I'm gonna introduce myself. So it wasn't until like many years later that he was working on a game jam for Prison City, and he asked me if I wanted to work on it, and I was busy. I think I was in the process of moving provinces in Canada, which is like a big deal. It's like a 12-hour drive, because I hadn't been working on chiptunes for quite a while at that point, and he needed some NES-style chiptunes. It said, you got to do this, you got to do this. So I worked on this game jam for him. It was only like a day's worth of work or something, but it was a whole day written off, and I wrote him as much as I possibly could, and I needed to do it quick. So I was like opening up old project files, because the way that I write chiptunes is I'll write as much as I can, and if you don't know if it'll fit, like if you don't know like if a little section will fit, you just move it to the end. And so at the end of a track, there's usually like 25% of content that it doesn't fit in your song and you can't use it, but it's back there. So I would just open up old project files and scroll to the end, like this part's not being used, like toss it in, finish it up, toss it in, finish it up. So I ended up giving them a lot of tunes for it, and some of them actually made it in the official game as well. But yeah, something about it, I liked the way it looked. Obviously, Prison City looked so cool. It's like Shatterhand and Power Blade, and Ninja Gaiden even. It's like all my favorite NES games, and I was like, I gotta work on this, because I've worked on NES music before, and a lot of people sometimes describe my music as like Capcom meets Konami, but this was a game where I'm like, I know what this game should sound like. I know it should sound like this, so it was not hard for me to dive all the way in on this one. If that answers your question, I don't know.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You actually answered my next question as to how did you find the sound of Prison City? And there are many times as a creative myself where I revisit old, unused pieces of work and find ways to incorporate them into new work. And that being said, as you were going through and finding those sounds and building on top of them, did you note that there were any specific influences in the music choices that you were making?
At this point, I've been listening to video game music more than I've listened to real music in my life. All of those influences just come in, and sometimes as a creative, you probably know this too, you have a little toolkit that you kind of dip into whenever you're in a jam. Like, oh, I don't know how to get out of this. So you're like, what's that go-to move I have that sometimes gets me out of jams? So as a person that's just listened to so much video game music, all of my toolkits are based on like this Freddy Krueger style amalgamation of like all the little tips I've learned.
Now I'm playing with power.
I'll write a lick in a game and then I'll think, oh, that's totally ripping off, Mega Man 3 or something. And then when I go back and listen to Mega Man 3, I'm like, it was nothing like it. It's like it truly has taken on a life of its own. Like, I don't know where that came from. Just a funny anecdote. One time I was writing NES music for a game called Slayin', and I was just in the shower and the water's beating down on your head and you can't really, you're hearing like, the sound of the drops on your skull kind of like, they make what your thoughts are kind of dip in and out. It's kind of like if you're crunching chips, you can't hear someone talking sometimes, like it's cutting words out. And while I was in the shower, like it occurred to me like the theme song for the game while I was in the shower. And I'm like, I gotta hum this until I get out of the shower and write it down fast. When you get the inspiration, like it hits you.
Yeah, dude, that makes a lot of sense. I totally get shower ideas or those 5-second ideas that you just have to write down. As those new ideas were coming to you, did you stay within chiptunes, or did you feel like you had to expand past that for some parts of the music?
Yeah, when you write chiptunes for 20 plus years like I have, I felt like I had already said everything I needed to say with chiptunes. When I got the call to write this game in the game jam, it was just pure NES music. But when I got the call to do the full score, I knew I wanted to do something that was bigger than just chiptunes. I'm not always interested in what note I've just hit. I'm more interested on what the next note is going to be. And I really felt like, what's the next step for chiptunes even? I put together an idea, like a protocol I came up with in my head where I'm like, I'm going to write the chiptunes as they are, the same way they've always been, raw NES chiptunes. But I want to add to that. And you have to be really careful when you're adding to NES chiptunes, because a lot of people think like, oh, what would be a good thing to do? Take the 2 square waves, which is what Nintendo had, 1 triangle wave, 2 square waves. It's like a bass player and 2 guitar players is how I always picture it. Let's pan the square waves left and right. That'll be sick, right? If you do that, like if you took Contra and just panned the square waves left and right, it won't sound as good as you're thinking in your head. NES music by default has always been mono. Everything's like in the middle channel. So when you start dinking around with the stereo separation of like authentic NES music, I know because I've done it, it sounds hollow. It doesn't sound right. So what I did was I wrote the NES music to be the center of my mix. After that, I ported everything from my tracker projects into like my actual digital audio workstation, so I could start applying some of this gear I have surrounding me to try and take it to another level. And so what I wanted to do, the protocol I came up with Prison City was like, all right, I want to make sure the drums sound way bigger than on the NES, because the NES drums, while I love them, some random guy that hasn't heard NES music since he played Contra when he was a kid,
Whoa, what's this?
or even some young kid today is probably going to be like, it sounds a little flat, it's not really, it's just not happening. So you have to apply these enhancements very carefully, because if you go too hard with it, you ruin all that nostalgia that people have. And if you don't go hard enough, then the people who have the HD memory won't really gel with it. I started adding like an extra layer on top of the NES music. So I wanted that NES music to stay in the middle, stay thick, stay nostalgic, and then start adding some extra layers so that people could really gel with the track, no matter what system they're listening to it on.
I love that. I feel like that's everything we try to do at Retroware, where we try to encapsulate that retro style, but inputting modern technology into it and help assimilate that like nostalgia that we had. I know Programancer tried to do that with some of the explosion sprites and some of the other graphics in the game, and you hit the ball out of the park with the music in capturing that classic old school Nintendo sound, old school 8-bit, 16-bit console sound, but it's still modern. So now that the game's out, do you feel like you have a favorite track in this game that stands out to you?
If I had to pick, I tend to lean towards the ones that are just crazier, or the ones that are faster or more chaotic. So I kind of like boss battles a lot in that regard. In fact, boss battles are my favorite tracks to write in the game. So Combatants is definitely one that I would say is up there. That's just a regular boss battle in the game. I don't want any spoilers, but the final boss theme I'm super stoked on, because I wrote a chiptune death metal album in 2010. Because I know they did that for Castlevania, because some of the music in Castlevania is note for note a Yngwie Malmsteen track. Like, I know they were listening to Yngwie Malmsteen when they wrote that track. Anyway, so that was my protocol for that project, was I wanted to see if I can write something really scary, like just scariest NES music ever. So I'm always fascinated by that, and boss battles definitely let me dip into like the scary stuff, because by default chiptunes don't sound scary, so you need to like finesse it a bunch to make it sound right. So I like writing boss battles a lot. I remember distinctly the Preserve track. The Preserve was one where I didn't think it was going to happen. Sometimes when you're writing chiptunes, especially because it's such a rigid, fickle medium, because it's so easy to make it sound bad. Like say if two notes hit the exact same note at one time, it'll sound buzzy and loud and awful. So you have to always be aware of like, don't hit the same note on two channels. Guitar players play the same thing all the time. It sounds amazing. So with chiptunes, you have to be really careful with that. And I remember thinking, oh man, I'm in over my head on Preserve. I don't know how the hell I'm gonna pull this one out. Like, how's it gonna sound proper? The pieces all fell into place, like almost like a chess player. Like sometimes you're writing a bit and you're like, I think I know how it's gonna wrap up. And like for a moment, I ascended to the next level of human evolution and said, here's the note. And it's like it was guiding my hands. And so I got really lucky with Preserve because I was punching above my weight. Preserve was one where I thought, man, I can't believe it worked out. It worked out so well. It just was a relief when that one was over.
Oh, I believe it, dude. Preserves is actually a bop. I do enjoy that level a lot, and not just because of the level design, but the music as well. It's really great to get to hear your creative process and where you get your inspiration from, as well as like how you started your career. Do you have any advice or insights you could give to other young composers that are just starting out? They're starting their career, either they're making gaming soundtracks or just any music in general.
If they're already writing music, they're already ahead of the curve. It's like a muscle. You have to keep working it out. You got to get pumped. You got to get jacked. So never ever stop writing music. Even if you're writing 30-second tracks, you know what a good technique for young composers is like, just try and finish that track. Even if it's 30 seconds long, just give it an ending or try and have it fade out. Like try and just work that muscle out, like of finishing a track. And the more you get used to doing that, the more you can have like all these little bits and pieces that you can use them later on too. Like if you're just writing music on your own, especially if it has an ending, it's way harder to go back and write an ending to a track. Like, oh, I've moved computers and I have a new operating system now. No project file's ever going to open. So practice finishing your tracks, even if they're little bits there. As for getting into the game industry, like we touched on at the beginning, I think it was a bit luck and a bit just pure, raw, like deranged perseverance. If you're that type of musician, it'll happen for you eventually, but the industry changes every week, and you have to actually watch and learn as much as you can about what developers are going through and what and just what the game industry is going through. Like as a composer, you need to be networking with absolutely everyone. Network with streamers, network with developers. I would say create a spreadsheet right now of all of the people that you could potentially contact so that you can see it, because you need to start visualizing what that networking looks like and not just like keep it in your head and be like, I think it'll all work out. And one thing for sure that I learned is like have a social media presence and always be putting out content. Even if it's not music, then make video content as well. I know that sounds very counterproductive, but if you're good at creating a thumbnail, that's a one leg in the door. So you need to become kind of a jack of all trades if you want to start promoting yourself and getting into this industry. Young composers, the good news is it's always changing. And if you're young right now, you probably know more than I do. It's a struggle for me to figure out what the hell are people doing now on the internet. Vigilance. It's the price we must constantly pay, okay?
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. Please let us know, where can we find the Prison City soundtrack now that we've heard so much about it?
Hey, you bunch of crazies. Thanks for checking out this video. You guys are awesome. And if you guys like what you see and what you hear on Prison City, it's available, let me check, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Bandcamp, and you can also purchase it with the game on Steam. So get in there.